Welcome to the Cauldron of Curiosities.
Hi, would you like to know about some of the travels that Bumblebee and I are on whilst we're moving around? We started off, some of you may know, from the Lizard, and we wandered around. We spent 10 days there. I thought I would be getting some rest and recuperation, but we did a lot of walking, so maybe we weren't getting as much rest and recuperation as I had thought we would. And we did get to see the seals on a couple of occasions, and there was a baby seal, and I say a baby seal, a seal pup that had come out of the sea to rest and was tucked up under where the old lifeboat station was, and they seemed to be coming in on a regular basis. We then moved across to Land's End and had a wander about there. Bumblebee wasn't feeling so great that day, so I'm not quite sure what was up with him. He was experiencing some aches and pains, so he really was not moving with as much grace as he normally does, so we had to limit how much we were walking around. And we have then moved up. We've spent a bit of time in Glastonbury doing a little bit of book gathering and stocking up the van. And I was looking at places to stay, and one of the options was this campsite in Trowbridge. I haven't been to Trowbridge before that I recall, but there is a canal. So the guy that runs the campsite said you can walk around on a loop. There's a couple of cafes, you'd be able to get a cake. So off we went. Well, I didn't measure any of this much out. We did get a nice cup of coffee at a coffee roasters that was in Hilperton, which is on the edge of Trowbridge. And as we were walking down the road, I noticed this hexagon of colour hanging in a willow tree, and I thought, that's interesting. And as I got closer, I could see this robot, and the robot was in chains. And there were colourful mushrooms and concrete creations and statues, and all painted in sort of pastely pinky colours. And there were like all of these tiles with people's writing on, which drew me in. And what I didn't realise was this was a thing. There was no notice on the map about this place. It looks like it's been there for some time. And it said it was called the Angel of Trowbridge. And people had come from various distances to view and leave their comments and visit the garden. And you've got a series of figures, including one with wings. And it's like, I can't think of the right word for it, a place where you would leave your thoughts and prayers and your wishes. There's some interesting sculptures in there. You've got necklaces and gifts hanging off the trees. And you can leave donations. There's flowers there. A shrine, that's the word, the shrine. So it says the Angel of Trowbridge. Give a donation, make a wish, tie a ribbon or trinket on the trees, or leave on the plinth. Receive the blessing of universal love. Please do not leave gifts here. Put them in the front garden and leave a comment or message if you wish. And there are various messages there. People have written their names down and said, that they've been there. I couldn't see any dates on anything. And unfortunately, the signal where I am means Google is not producing any responses. I keep getting, we're not getting anywhere. Which happens to me frequently, that I end up staying on places where there's no Wi-Fi and 4G says it's there, but it doesn't actually do anything, which means I end up reading books. So I'm looking over my photographs and I'm thinking, there's a lot of people were commenting about they love the artwork, they love this concept about having an open mind, and there are questions that have been written about, do you feel indoctrinated? Do you know what societal indoctrination is? And has it happened to you? And what is the concept of society's rules? How does it change you? And do you celebrate your originality? And this is intermingled with the comments about how wonderful the artwork is and the ideas that this artist has come up with. And he's called Adam. And then it says conformity is monotony. To give you some ideas, it says, do societies indoctrinate their citizens? What are the parameters of your existence? Has your mind been programmed by your culture and society? And if you think about it, you know the comments that I was making about Regency society and how women had to get married to create a sense of safety. And the only way that a woman could be secure was if she was a rich widow. But if you think about it, earlier society, you would not have been safe being a rich widow, because unless you had family nearby, if someone wanted your land, they would have called you a witch. And so, rich widow or not, you become a witch, you lose your land and your property. So, fear again comes in, doesn't it? People behave themselves because they are made to fear. So fight for fear. And it says protect your mind from psychological framing. An enslaved mind asks no questions. I did have a problem with this one. Don't allow the older generations to turn you into one of them. I am an older generation. I'm 60, but I think I'm quite open-minded, and I would like to think that I'm looking for ways to be free and to allow people to be true to who they are, to what their soul is calling them to be. And it says it takes great care, great courage, originality and character to be different. Do you possess these qualities? Your greatest possession is your freedom of mind. And who made you believe you had to fit into conventional human society? Good question. Who made you believe that? And why was it important? And you can work through all of that without blaming them. Which is quite hard, isn't it? Because when you were young and somebody was telling you and you believed them because they were the adult, how do you not blame them? How do you learn to get away from wanting to say it was their fault because of the age difference? I think I need to have a word with Gill Edwards about this, because there are certain aspects where the information that we were given brainwashes us. So how do we get out of that being brainwashed? How do we free our mind so that we're not tied by these ideas, that we allow our mind to be free? Fear is the mental barrier to achieving your true potential and fulfillment. And that is so true, isn't it? So I'm going to leave the comment on this particular place with the Angel of Trowbridge. Do look it up. Fear is the mental barrier to achieving your true potential and fulfillment. then we carried on. We had brunch at the garden centre, which was very nice. But I am slightly concerned because when I start digging into their cakes, I didn't have any cakes. Mainly because I found out recently that they use a type of margarine called Phase, and Phase has got palm oil in. I've always loved cakes, but I'm not eating cakes that have got palm oil in. I'd rather not do that to myself. I don't want to eat anything that's been industrial refined because of the process of how they do it. It's not good for me or you. So I didn't have the cakes. I had scrambled eggs. And yes, there was part of me that was going, oh, why couldn't you have cake? But we said no to cake. We carried on and went on to the Kennet and Avon Canal. And I loved looking at the different ways that people live on the water. And there are obviously the beautifully big houses that come onto the back of the water on the side of Trowbridge. And there were a couple of, I think they're those Dutch barges because they're like a wide beam. And so there you can get normal furniture on board. Some of those were beautiful. And some of the stuff they had, beautiful, very artfully done. And there were a couple of places where there were permanent moorings where people had sheds and things. I'm assuming that they pay a long-term rent in those places. But that was interesting to see. And I also saw, the only thing I'm trying not to be judgy here, but they had a lot of stuff on the roof. I don't know how they could access the stuff on the roof. And it was a big boat as well. But maybe it was a big family living on board. But there was a lot, yeah, it was even like old bikes. There was stuff on the roof that possibly had gone past its sell-by date, as in, was it still functional? Maybe it was Steptoe and Son, and they've moved to living on the river, and it was a scrap barge. Maybe. I don't know. But there was a lot of stuff on the roof. And I have never, and I've wandered around a few canals in my time, seen a barge with quite that much stuff on the roof. And it was not even in the mooring area that was meant to be permanent. This was in like you can stay here for 2 days, according to the rivers people. How they get along? I'm surprised it was above the waterline, and how it reacts to when it's really windy with all of that stuff on board. But then I thought, would I start doing that? If I had a boat and I wanted to store things, would I be starting to get those big black and yellow boxes and a car box, etc., or would I keep everything inside? Would I create an attic on my roof? I'd like to think that I probably wouldn't, but I don't have a lot of junk in my van. I've got a lot of books, and I'm constantly clearing through and going, I've not used it recently, not read that book, shall I move it on, shall I take it in, maybe sell it? So it was an eye-opener, because I sometimes look at the things that I'm thinking about and going, and I've got these thoughts going on in my head and going, would I do that? Would that be me? Or would I have that beautiful one with the peacocks and the flamingos on the side? I like to think that I'd have a really luscious looking one with the flamingos on the side if I could afford it. Something to think about. Because I have been considering maybe living on a boat one day. We are still travelling with van because the plan is to see as much of the UK as we can and come across interesting places such as the Angel of Trowbridge.
Part 2. What books have I been reading?
It's January, and I have been thinking about what changes do I need to make for the podcast. Would I like to get some feedback? Oh yeah, if anybody's got any thoughts about topics that they would like me to include on the podcast, I'm always open to hearing about them. Obviously, because it is the Cauldron of Curiosities, I do have this tendency to go down a few rabbit holes and maybe talk about things where you might think that doesn't quite fit with the other subject. So, I have been thinking that I should maybe talk to you about the books that I have been reading. And I actually have a number of books on the go at the moment. So the first book that I have on the go is called Wild Love. Have any of you heard of it? It's by a lady called Gill Edwards, that's Gill with a G. And she talks about how we can transform and become more connected with the deeper part of ourselves, because whatever is on the outside is a reflection of what is on the inside. And I would quite like to have a philosophical chat about some of the topics and maybe how my brain perceives what she's saying in the book about certain elements that we might need to go through. And she talks about the call that we might hear, where our lives will start to change when we start listening, when we start waking up. And you might be listening to this and wonder what she means by the term of waking up. And I suppose it's that idea of not living life safely, of maybe doing the things that you've always wanted to do. Some of you who maybe have listened before know that I've always had this idea of travelling. I wanted to go and see different parts of the world, and that was something that wanted to be. I always wanted this as a young person, and that's one of the reasons I joined up into the armed forces, because it was an opportunity to help me travel. I wasn't rich, I wasn't earning the money, and I certainly didn't have the ideas for getting the jobs that other people did who were able to travel. I wasn't going to be getting the grand tour because there wasn't the money for it. So, yeah, joined up, and I got to go to Lincolnshire and Aldershot, and I went back to Lincolnshire despite asking for a posting to Scotland. I would like to think that I was actually really rooting to go to Scotland, so I'm not quite sure how I ended up in Lincolnshire. Now, Jill also talks about us not blaming others, and that doesn't quite align with what Gabor Mate says about some of the stuff that happens to us when we're small. So if we have created this thing that's happened to us when we were small, how did we achieve that? Is it because we chose that before we came to this part of our consciousness, that we are inviting the challenges? And yeah, so maybe that is a thing that we need to explore, and we can do that when we're journaling, can't we? Think about, did I invite that? Why did I invite that? Why did I want those challenges? And what am I learning from that? And why did making my life difficult? Why did being bullied? How did I invite that bully into my life? What was I doing that allowed them to step over the boundaries And was it all me? Was it all me? And the only thing, I suppose, is you can look at Don Miguel Ruiz, who says we can look at how we react to things, can't we? How, someone may be throwing the toys out of their pram, and we can choose whether we're going to pick them up and pop them back in the pram for them to throw them out again, or we can leave the room. Or we could throw the toys back at them, which might not necessarily go down very well. Now, the other book that I was reading is one of Ben Aranovic's books from the Rivers of London. Have any of you read those? So I find those quite interesting because every now and again, Ben throws up a textbook and he talks about them learning about Sir Isaac Newton's magic. And Sir Isaac Newton, everyone is aware of. And he was known as a scientist. So where does the magic piece come in? I actually did get given some notes about Sir Isaac Newton's concepts around how magic happens, because it is about our ability to manipulate elements within the web, of which we are all part of. And it should not be as difficult as people say it is. And there's differing levels on where people say we can do that. Those of you who haven't read The Rivers of London or listened to them, this is a young man who is joined a specialist department of a police force in London, where they're dealing with magical individuals. And I do find it quite interesting because it brings in some of the things that we know about London. It includes some of the myths around London, to do with the underground and the sewers. And it also looks at the fact that there are goddesses of the rivers of London. And if you believe in the energy of the elementals and how energy aligns with the rivers and streams, why shouldn't there be a goddess of the river? And Terry Pratchett would probably say that if the people in that area believe in the river having a goddess, there will be one. Because we have that capacity to make these things happen. And that I do find quite interesting, that we have that conscious capacity. And that ties back in with what Gill Edwards has been saying about the capacity of our deeper self creating the outer experience of what we're seeing. Much to be digging into there, isn't there? And what else have I been reading? Well, you're not going to believe this. I actually picked up this book and it was called Regency Revenge. I did not pay a lot of attention to the book publisher, but I thought, no, I quite fancy something easy to read. It was from Morrison, because Morrison's has got a shelf of books that raising money for Marie Curie charity. So I started reading it while I was in there having a snack. And it was interesting because I realised quite early on there was a bit of a format going on with the writing. And it was enjoyable. I did enjoy certain aspects of it. This is Regency, so we're talking Georgette Heyer territory. And it's that plot where man meets woman and they're destined to be together by the end of it. They're going to fall out. They might not like each other very much, but he can't take his eyes off her and she can't stop thinking about him. And they're both generally written as characters who don't follow the norm of society. And this is what was happening in this book. But actually it was two books in one. But they did follow a theme because you met the characters more than once. And the girls that she describes are very intelligent, a little bit kooky, maybe not that interested in getting married, despite the fact that they're incredibly beautiful and lots of men are falling around them, wanting to marry them. And it made me think, why do so many people enjoy the whole Regency romance? Because has anyone ever experienced that Regency romance idea? Or is it a form of escapism to think that somebody could sweep you off your feet and you no longer have to worry about who's going to be paying the rent, or, he owns his own house, he has an income, and you will have all the dresses that you need, and you'll be able to go out in society, and everybody will love you. And that idea of developing a relationship where you are meeting a certain type, where you will be a virtuous young lady, means you're squeezing yourself into society's norms, which sort of goes against what Gill Edwards is saying in Wild Love, is where we are stopping ourselves from being who we truly need to be because we're living within society's constraints. So should we be doing that? And if we shouldn't be doing that, why do we love these Regency stories? Why do we love the idea that someone out there is going to love us more than anyone else, when in reality we are unconditionally loved? We just forget that we are. And that's quite hard to accept, isn't it, that we are loved. We might not feel like we're being loved by some of the human beings around us, but I certainly feel the love from a four-legged friend I live with. And it isn't just about the biscuits. So how did society manage to create this concept that women should be seeking someone who's going to put a roof over their head, who's going to nurture them and love them, and that if he loves you as well, that's even more amazing? Because it completely took any equality out of the framework. But of course, there's this other part, that the whole way that society has been heading for the past thousands of years has been very masculine. And we need to rebalance that. And the rise of feminism, or the feminine, isn't about women's rights, so to speak. It's about recognising the feminine aspects and balancing it out with the masculine aspects to allow us all to live in a level of harmony. And that doesn't appear to be sometimes what society wants us to be doing. And then we look at some of the trends and the things that seem to be normal right now within society for women. And is it feminine? And what is feminine? Feminine is being in touch with our emotions. But then when we look back, not that long ago, especially in the UK, we were all being told not to be in touch with our emotions, to not talk about how we feel. So that makes a rod for our own backs, doesn't it? There are other nations who are in better touch with their emotions, and maybe they have found a solution on how they might take things forward. So those are some of the books that I've been reading. And then they lead me to think about society and rules and why we follow rules. Rules are there. We're often told to keep us safe. Are they always there to keep us safe? If you listen to some of the podcasts that I did around some of the folk tales that implied rules, not to go out after dark, don't go down that road, I have a sneaking suspicion those rules were there for the working class, for the peasant, to stop the peasant being nosy, to stop the peasant from uncovering things that he shouldn't. Because I'm quite sure that there were other members of society who were wandering around regardless of the rules. So if we don't think the rules apply to us, how do we change that? Do we turn round and start refusing to follow the rules? Well, if they're laws, we could find ourselves in prison quite quickly, couldn't we? Even though the prisons are pretty full. So how do we get around not doing the things that we think we shouldn't be doing? Do we look at campaigning and petitions? I actually had a look at some petitions recently, and there were hundreds of them. There are something like 400 pages on the petition site saying basically this subject, and this was one around what we have put in our food. The amount of people who had raised a petition, gathered thousands of signatures, and nothing had happened. So if petitions don't work, what does work? How do we make changes? Gathering together can help. Look at the farmers. They've been going out and protesting in visible places, but they've got this capacity to gather together as a community. And I would like to think that we will see change as a result of that. I think it's a shame that our country is buying in produce from overseas when we should be growing it at home, especially when we see the farmers are growing it. And what about those videos of farmers pouring milk into the ground? Because companies like Muller say, oh, we don't need it anymore, throw it away. They're paid to throw the milk away. Someone somewhere could have had that milk. There are people who are going without, but I'm quite sure that Muller wasn't going to give that milk away. And yet there was nothing wrong with the milk. And we see other examples of waste where companies allow it to happen, or the rules say you can't give away the food because it's got a particular date on it, but there isn't anything wrong with it. So why are we not allowed to give it away? And where did these rules come along that made it so difficult to share food and resources? But you can't be kind, you can't support others, you can't cook food in your home and take it out to the homeless, because somebody will complain and you may get fined, or worse, because it deemed as you breaking the rules. But you can invite them round to your home if you have space. Well, I don't have space to have anybody in. There's just enough space for me and Bumble. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't make a pot of soup and take it out, but I wouldn't be allowed to do that because I don't have an industrial kitchen. And I sometimes think that some of these rules that have been made up by society are there to stop us helping each other, to stop us offering a helping hand. Are they really there to protect anyone? And where are the examples of it protecting people? There is much to mull over there, isn't there? Because it does sometimes feel like health and safety and insurance have changed this country, but not for the better. It has created a society that is in fear. And if we're constantly in fear, how do we feel the love? How do we feel the joy of what is around us if we're constantly frightened? One of the things that I did to help myself not feel fear as much or not feel irritation, I stopped watching the news, because I realised that certain events you would get to hear about, I can assure you, it did not take long before I heard about Donald Trump breaking into Venezuela and taking their president away. That came through quite quickly, and I don't watch the news. Why on earth would he do that? Creating chaos in the Americas. But it's created a lot of fear, because people are saying, now he's done that, what are the other countries going to do? They've now got a carte blanche to go and invade and do whatever they want to do. So it hasn't created a sense of safety or people to feel, yes, I can see why Donald did that. He was trying to create a safer America. And yet, some of the videos I've watched on YouTube indicate that people are not feeling safer as a result of recent actions. So these rules, these changes, us seeing people going in and interfering, our own country going in and interfering with the way things that are done, when was it okay when we were offering assistance and support? And when did it become stepping over the boundary? And I guess we can take that all back to how we are and how we have our relationships with our friends. When is it within the bounds of normality and in the best interest of both of us? And when does it become a case of where we are blurring the boundaries or allowing them to step over the boundary, and then the relationship changes and the world changes, our world changes because of how we react to things. And a world that encourages stress and fear doesn't place any of us in a good space, does it? And I guess you could sort of tie that back in to the third book that I mentioned. Why did Regency Romances do so well? Because they offered an escape. They offered this idea that if you were beautiful, there was an opportunity for you to have all of your fears assuaged, because you would meet someone and that person would feed you and you'd have a roof over your head. And because they were madly in love with you, you would get all the things that you needed and you would be treated like a princess. And therefore, it would stop you from being frightened of things at that time. What do you think? Do you think it helps to be frightened of what is going on? Do you think watching the news 24/7 helps you get a better grip of what's going on in the world? Or do you find that your heart races as a result of being exposed to knowing too much? Some people and some experts believe that we aren't emotionally capable of being exposed to that level of horror and bad news because it's constant. And some people do watch the news more than others, and we don't have that capacity to compartmentalise in it and let it go and be able, and so they don't sleep, and they may have other health issues, in inflammatory responses as a result of creating this big issue around fear of what might happen next and about not being able to do anything about what they're seeing. What about if they don't have any money? They can't donate anything, but they're being asked all the time to donate to charities, from dogs for the homeless and cats' homes, to abused animals overseas, to children who are abused, adults who are homeless. It's constant that you're being poked from all angles to give something, to give your money, not your time, interestingly, and you're bombarded with unpleasantness. And how do you find yourself a time to go, no, I'm going to take time out. I'm going to create a boundary around this. And I'm going to have moments of joy. I'm going to create moments of joy for me. So I know that it's not all about the bad things that are going on. I'm going to look for the hope. I'm going to look for the light. And start looking for it. Be a light seeker or be a joy seeker. Have fun and play. We forget to play, don't we? We're so bogged down by adult nonsense and fear that we forget to have fun. We forget to play with the wind. We forget to dance with the sea. And we don't play shadow puppets with the sun anymore. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, do contact me or comment. You can find me at info@thedandelion.co.uk, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Part 3. What have I found on my travels?
Being digital all the time doesn't always work for me, and one of the things that I really enjoy is foraging. At the moment, I have been walking along some of the pathways along the coast by the Lizard, which is in South Cornwall, and I noticed that there is a profusion of a plant that I know as Alexander's. It's also called horse parsley or Smyrnium olusatrum. Its season is meant to start in January, so why is it that I'm seeing plenty of this plant in November? The leaves are ovate and bluntly toothed in groups of 3, and they are that natural green colour, maybe a yellowy green to a darker green, depending on how you like to identify it. The flowers, when they do come, are small, yellow, and they're very similar to the display that you might see with a cow parsley. The flowers shouldn't be appearing until March, but I wonder if they're going to come early. Now, all of these parts are edible. The Romans apparently ate Alexanders as an alternative to celery, but you can also dry the seeds and they're quite spicy, or in the winter you can cut the young shoots and eat those. They're the ones that are like the celery. Once the plant starts to have the sap rise to be able to form the flowers, the stalks can become quite woody, so they might not be so pleasant to eat raw. They say that it smells quite fragrant and sweet, and you may be confused when you're looking, because apparently angelica leaves do look similar, but they're not as shiny and they tend to be found in a different habitat. Alexanders do have a tendency to like to grow near the coast. Are there any medicinal uses for it? Well, Alexanders have been used for asthma, menstrual problems, and healing wounds in the past. So that would indicate that it's got astringent qualities to it, potentially, but it did say that they don't tend to get used in the 21st century. Doesn't mean it can't be used now. But what you can do is you can candy the Alexander stems, or you can pickle them. And I would suggest that if you use something like apple cider vinegar to pickle your Alexanders. If you have any questions about our foraging cupboard, do let me know.